All right, we're now moving on to the Dome of Florence Cathedral. Doming was one of the Renaissance's greatest architectural features. The challenge, however, was to figure out how it could actually be executed. Brunelleschi's brilliance was his ability to innovate technology to complete the building, and his work helps architects later. This cathedral had already been under construction for more than 100 years, Maria del Fiore, Our Lady of the Flower, and it is meant to be the largest and most ornate in Italy. It is to replace the old Santa Reparata, which was constructed in the 6th century. The foundation was laid in 1296 under Arnolfo di Cambio, and under him had already been built Palazzo Vecchio and the city's fortifications. He dies soon after it begins, and several architects are working on it. So the work starts and stops for 50 years. And in 1355, it does have the facade, and the main wall was completed. Main wall. In 1366, the nave is vaulted, and the east end is ready. In the 1330s, the building was the responsibility of the Wool Guild. They were the largest and wealthiest of the guilds, and they hired various groups, and they settled on a design by Neri di Fioravanti. And he proposed a dome without flying buttresses, but with a ring of stone or wood. This is literally a leap of faith, and it would be over 143 feet in diameter. This is larger than the Pantheon's dome. The walls would reach 140 feet high. It would have a 30-foot drum. That's going to be the circular portion from which the dome would rest upon. And the vaulting would begin at 170 feet off the ground. The highest cathedral at the time was 157 feet total. And this dome is going to begin at a height higher than the largest church at the time. The plan was for 2 nested domes, a taller exterior dome shielding a shorter interior one, and it would be pointed. The model was put on display, and the community all swore it would be built. They just didn't know how. Enter Brunelleschi. He is born in 1377. His dad, Sir Brunelleschi di Lippo Lippi, was a notary. Brunelleschi was apprenticed at age 15 to a goldsmith. Benicassa Latti trained him, and he became a master goldsmith and clockmaker in 1398 at age 21. Not bad. In 1401, he competed for the commission to sculpt the Florence baptistry doors. He was one of 7 to enter the competition, but Ghiberti, who was younger and not trained, was the one who won. And it should be won, not won. And this, of course, insults Brunelleschi. Oh my goodness, how could that kid win? Blah, 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 blah. So the story is Brunelleschi renounces sculpture, and he leaves. Oh my goodness. Got that word over there. And he leaves. Let me see if we can move this so we can see what it says. Oh, and he leaves for Rome to study the ancient ruins there. He does return to Florence in 1416 or 17 and did the Ospedale degli Innocenti, the Pazzi Chapel, and the Church of Santo Spirito, as well as the Florence Cathedral. So when he comes back, he actually has lots of work. He is celebrated as the inventor of linear perspective. Thank you, Brunelleschi. And he is the most important architect of the early Renaissance. After his death on April 15, 1446, Florence honors him by burying him in the cathedral that he was the architect of, and says, is inscripted, "Here lies the body of the great ingenious man, Filippo Brunelleschi of Florence." All right. Solution for the dome. The competition for creating the method to build the dome, they had a competition again to see who would win, and the winner would get 200 gold florins. Woohoo! There were 12 models, and Ghiberti also joins the competition. You know, that probably made Brunelleschi angry or happy to compete against him again. And both were elected Capomaestro, or architect-in-chief. But Brunelleschi's model would guide the work, which began in August 7th, 1420. There are two major problems in building this dome. First, the design for the temporary wooden structure had to support and hold masonry in place, so they had to even create that design first. And then, how to lift to such great heights the sandstone and marble. No one in Italy had any idea how to build this. So Brunelleschi proposes echoing the construction of the Pantheon. The inner dome would taper in width as it ascended from 7 inches to 7 feet to 5 feet thick. And the outer shell would begin at over 2 feet at the base and thin to 1 foot at the top. Sandstone was used for the first 46 feet of height, and then it shifted to brick or tufa, which would be lighter. The horizontal interior ring of stone is buried in masonry and invisible. There would be 8 vertical ribs placed on the exterior to buttress the form. Centering was going to be a challenge. Getting enough lumber was going to be a problem. So Brunelleschi suggested that no centering would be used, and he refused to explain how he could be able to center this dome without it. Lifting was another problem. The sandstone beams weighed 1,700 pounds each. So Brunelleschi designs a hoist that becomes celebrated. His will not use human power, but ox power. The lift itself is going to be large and very complex. The cogged wheels are 15 feet high on a frame, and it has a reversible gear. This is the first time ever there's a reversible gear. One ox could raise a 1,000-pound load 200 feet in 13 minutes. Brunelleschi's careful planning ensured the project would succeed. Sandstone and wooden chains kept it stable, so no centering was needed. The dome was consecrated on March 25th, 1426. The only thing left to finish was the exterior surfacing with terracotta tiles and a colored marble facing and the lantern at the pinnacle. However, Brunelleschi died before it was completed. His legacy and influence. The dome has a lasting impact. It was carefully studied. Leonardo da Vinci sketched it, and he learned much from the hoist. Many dome lanterns, such as St. Peter's in Rome, is inspired by Brunelleschi's. When Michelangelo was first awarded the Architectural Commission for St. Peter's, he visited Florence for insight and, of course, looks at Brunelleschi's work. It also impacts the development of astronomy. I don't know, that's kind of weird. Paolo Toscanelli positioned a bronze plate at the lantern's base. As sunlight passed through an aperture, it fell 300 feet onto a gauge Toscanelli installed. The instrument tracked the movement of the sun, determining the summer solstice and the vernal equinox, and these dates later helped set the church calendar. It was also central in developing astronomical tools used for sea navigation. In the medieval ages, arches were anonymous, but Brunelleschi's accomplishments shifted the thinking about architecture and, of course, about the role of the artist. So here we have, this is the interior. Okay, here's the exterior. This portion here, that is called the lantern, and you can actually go out and walk around, so give you an idea of how large this particular piece is. Alright, now we go to decorated pages for Quran and development of paper in China. One of the most important technological advances, of course, is paper. It's going to allow for transfer of knowledge. And it also provides new methods of thinking in math, economics, map making, and music. Once people are able to record information, they can then transmit and share information, and they're able to reason better and in more innovative ways. So the paper is made, first you thin it by matting and twining vegetable fibers, hemp, jute, or bamboo. The raw material is ground into a pulp, and then water is added to make slurry. The slurry is set into a frame screen so the water will drain. When the fiber is left, it's removed, pressed, and dried, and that's how you create paper. Also used were papyrus from reeds, tapa and amate tree barks, and rice paper from pith of rice paper plant in China. Animal skins, sheep, goat, or calf skins, were used for parchment or vellum. But true paper is from fibers that have been pulped, so each fiber is a separate unit. Papyrus was made by cutting strips of reeds and laying them on a board and hammering them together. It's difficult to tell when it was first created because, of course, paper is perishable. It's been in use for at least 2,000 years. The earliest fragments we have are from paper in China at Lop Nor, discovered in 1901. Sven Hayden found them and dated it to 250 Common Era. Believed paper was invented in China along with the brush as a tool. And the first Chinese paper maker mentioned in Chinese was a eunuch, Sai Lun. He was reported to have worked for Emperor Ho Ti. Now, paper in the Islamic world. The Muslim Arab armies conquered Central Asia in 8th century, so they were introduced to paper. Paper in Islamic world was made from rags because the plants in Asia could not be grown in the desert. So Arabs brought paper and the technique of making it from cloth to Europe. Paper and the printing press. Paper was well established in Europe by the mid-11th century. The earliest centers were in Spain and then moved to Italy. They were also made in Sicily, Venice, Milan, and Genoa. Europe is the first to produce paper by a machine, which leads to the invention of the printing press. It's quicker than a scribe because, before the 15th century, all books were written by hand, and usually in a monastery. So there you have the possibility of errors, and of course it took a long time to write out a book. The first process used a wooden block carved to print an entire page. So you would have to, this would be the entire page, so then you have to carve it out. Of course, it had to be backwards, so great skill. But in Renaissance was a development of movable type, the interchangeable letters. So now you're just going to carve out each letter. And those could be reset and used again and again and again. Johannes Gutenberg of Mainz, Germany is the inventor. His Bible was made in the 1450s. There were 35 on parchment, 165 on paper, and only 48 survive. Gutenberg worked at a mint in Mainz, so the family was familiar with the casting technique, how to make the letters. They used ink from a pigment ground in linseed oil for smoother lettering. And his press used a screw mechanism. It was faster and more consistent transfer. Before, the process was using friction and rubbing. The decorated pages. The Quran, of course, these are the sacred words as revealed by God. And in Arabic, they were revealed to Muhammad in the 7th century. This text was handwritten, and the use of a press had been forbidden. It was first published, or the first published Quran was printed by Paganino de Paganini in Venice in 1538 for Christian missionaries. The printing press did not arrive in Arab world until the 18th century. Most early Islamic books are Qurans. They are carefully protected. They are considered sacred and therefore expensive. Still, the most important experience of the Quran is supposed to be through recitation. The text was only supposed to serve as a memory aid, and the biggest goal in the Islamist culture is to be a hafiz, or a guardian. That's one who knows the text by heart, so you could repeat the entire thing. The physical form was not supposed to be important. Qurans were carefully designed. They were written in calligraphy, and that's a key to keep it uniform, and became highly decorated over time, now considered art form. Calligraphy was also employed in architectural decoration. The Quran did not ban use of images of people and animals in sacred spaces. However, a prohibition against these forms was still laid out. So there were restrictions in paintings, books, and buildings led to more use of textual elements. So if they couldn't be decorative in these things, at least they could be decorative with how they wrote words. The 2 pages are 8 inches by 8.5. They may or may not have actually been in a Quran. There appears to be text under the grid and painted at the center of each page. So they may have been an example of, or they were intended for reuse for another Quran or other ornamented manuscript. There's rich gold and blue and elaborate scroll embellishments, and this is typical for opening pages of a Quran during the 1500s in Turkey. This does not clearly illustrate calligraphy, obviously, and they're not bound together to form a complete copy. Since they are loose, however, it does allow us to see them better. And that's the end for this one.